Journeys Out of the Body by Robert Monroe, Chapter 3, On the Evidence. In the fall of 1964, an interesting meeting was held one evening in Los Angeles. It was composed of some 20 assorted psychiatrists, psychologists, scientists, etc., and myself. It was a most rewarding evening. The purpose of the meeting was to examine with sincerity and seriousness the experiences and experiments which have been condensed herein. After several hours of interrogation by the group, it was my turn. I asked two simple questions of each of them. If you were going through what I have been experiencing, what would you do? It was the definite opinion of the majority, more than 2/3, that every effort should be made to continue such experimentation in the hope of enlightening and expanding man's knowledge of himself. Several half-seriously stated that I should run, not walk, to the nearest psychiatrist. None present offered his services. The second question, would you personally take part in experiments that would lead to the creation of such unusual activity in yourself? Here, the pattern changed somewhat. About half stated their willingness to participate. Oddly, in this group were some of those who were most skeptical of the reality of such experiences. Of course, this gave me the opportunity to nudge gently those who were in favor of continued experiments. When it came to the dive into the cold, strange waters, there's a word here I can't read. Oh, let someone else do it. And in many ways, I don't blame them. If presented to me 12 years ago, I doubt that I would have volunteered. Why did the group bother to assemble? Curiosity, perhaps, or again, it may have been in the evidential material that had been accumulated. I hope the latter. Here are some of the key reports from the notes which aroused their interest. And there's a date here, 9/10/58, afternoon. Again, I floated upward with the intent of visiting Dr. Bradshaw and his wife. Realizing that Dr. Bradshaw was ill in bed with a cold, I thought I would visit him in the bedroom, which was a room I had not seen in his house, and if I could describe it later, could thus document my visit. Again came the turning in air, the dive into the tunnel, and this time the sensation of going uphill. Dr. and Mrs. Bradshaw live in a house some 5 miles from my office up a hill. I was over trees, and there was a light sky above. Momentarily, I saw in the sky a figure of a rounded human form, seemingly dressed in robes and a headpiece on his head. And then in brackets it says, an oriental concept remains. Sitting, arms in lap, perhaps cross-legged, a la Buddha. Then it faded. I don't know the meaning of this. After a while, the uphill travel became difficult, and I had the feeling that the energy was leaving, and I felt I couldn't make it. With this thought, an amazing thing happened. It felt precisely as if someone had placed a hand under each arm and lifted me. I felt a surge of lifting power, and I rushed quickly up the hill. Then I came upon Dr. and Mrs. Bradshaw, and they were outside the house, and for a moment I was confused. As I had reached them before I got to the house, I didn't understand this because Dr. Bradshaw was supposed to be in bed. Dr. Bradshaw was dressed in a light overcoat and hat, his wife in a dark coat and all dark clothes. They were coming toward me. I stopped. They seemed in good spirits and walked past me, unseeing, in the direction of a smaller building, like a garage. Brad, trailing behind as they walked, I floated around in front of them, waving, trying to get their attention, without result. Then, without turning his head, I thought I heard Dr. Bradshaw say to me, "Well, I see you don't need help anymore." Thinking I had made contact, I dove back into the ground, ? And returned to the office, rotating into the body and opening my eyes. Everything was just as I had left it. The vibration was still present, but I felt I had had enough for one day. Important aftermath, : We phoned Dr. and Mrs. Bradshaw that evening. Excuse me. I made no statement other than to ask where they had been between 4 and 5 that afternoon. In brackets, my wife, upon hearing of the visit, said flatly it was not possible. Could not be so because Dr. Bradshaw was home, in bed, sick. With Mrs. Bradshaw on the phone, I asked the simple question. She stated that roughly at 4:25, they were walking out of the house towards the garage. She was going to the post office, and Dr. Bradshaw decided that perhaps some fresh air might help him, and had dressed and gone along. She knew the time back-checking from the time they arrived at the post office, which was 20 minutes to 5. It takes roughly 15 minutes to drive to the post office from their house. I had come back from my trip to them at approximately 4:27. I asked what they were wearing. Mrs. Bradshaw stated that she was wearing black slacks and a red sweater, which was covered with a black car coat. Dr. Bradshaw was wearing a light hat and a light-colored top coat. However, neither saw me in any way or were aware of my presence. Dr. Bradshaw had no memory of saying anything to me. The great point is that I had expected to find him in bed and didn't. The coincidences involved were too much. It was not important to prove this to anyone else, only to me. It proves to me, truly, for the first time, that there might be more to this than normal science and psychology and psychiatry allow, more than an aberration, trauma, or hallucination. And I needed some form of proof more than anyone else, I am sure. It is a simple incident, but unforgettable. In this visit to Dr. Bradshaw and his wife, the time of visit coincides with the physical event. The autosuggestion hallucination factor is negative. I expected to find Dr. Bradshaw in bed in the house, but did not do so, and was puzzled by the inconsistency. Identical reports with conditions of actual events. Identical reports with conditions of actual events. 1. Location of Dr. Bradshaw and his wife. 2. Position of the two relative to each other. 3. Actions of the two. 4. Wearing apparel of the two. Possibility of unconscious pre-knowledge through earlier observation of the above. Negative. Number 1. Negative. Had no information of their change in plans or time habits of the post office visits. 2. Indeterminate, consciously, at least unaware of who walks first. 3. Negative. Would have no pre-knowledge of their walking across to the garage in such a fashion. 4. Indeterminate. May have observed both in similar dress, but expected to find only one, Dr. Bradshaw, in bedclothes. Now here's another date, 3/5/59 morning. In a motel in Winston-Salem, I woke up early and went out to have breakfast at 7:30, then returned to my room about 8:30 and lay down. As I relaxed, the vibrations came and then an impression of movement. Shortly thereafter, I stopped, and the first thing I saw was a boy walking along and tossing a baseball in the air and catching it. A quick shift, and I saw a man trying to put something into the back seat of a car, a large sedan. The thing was an awkward-looking device that I interpreted to be a small car with wheels and electric motor. The man twisted and turned the device and finally got it into the back seat of the car and slammed the door. Another quick shift, and I was standing beside a table. There were people sitting around this table, and dishes covered it. One person was dealing what looked like large white playing cards around to the others at the table. I thought it was strange to play cards at a table so covered with dishes, and I wondered about the overlarge size and the whiteness of the cards. Another quick shift, and I was over city streets about 500 feet high, looking for home in quotes. Then I spotted the radio tower, and I remembered that the motel was close to the tower. And almost instantly I was back in my body, and I sat up, I looked around, and everything seemed normal. Important aftermath. The same evening I visited some friends, Mr. and Mrs. Agnew Bossum, in their home. They were particularly aware of my activities, and on a sudden hunch, I knew the morning event had to do with them. I asked about their son, and they called him into the room and asked him what he was doing between 8:30 and 9 that morning. He said that he was going to school. When I asked more specifically what he was doing as he went, he said he was tossing his baseball in the air and catching it. Although I knew him well, I had no knowledge that the boy was interested in baseball, although this could be assumed. Next, I decided to speak about the loading of the car. Mr. Benson was astounded. Exactly at that time, he told me, he was loading a Van de Graaff generator into the back seat of his car. The generator was large, an awkward device with wheels, an electric motor, and a platform. He showed me the device. It was eerie to see physically something that you had observed only from the second body. Next, he told me about the table and the large white cards. His wife was excited at this. It seems that for the first time in 2 years, because they had all arisen late, she had brought the morning mail to the breakfast table and had passed out the letters to him as she sorted the mail. Large white playing cards. They were very excited over this event, and I'm sure that they were not humoring me. In the morning visit to Mr. Benson and his family, the time of the visit coincides with the actual events. Autosuggestion, hallucination, negative. No conscious intent of visit, although conscious motivation possible. Identical reports with conditions of actual events. And then he lists these identical reports. 1. Son walking down the street, tossing the ball in the air. Number 2. Mr. Benson at the car. 3. Mr. Benson's activities at car. Number 4. Device he had at car. 5. Action of Mr. Benson at table, the dealing of the cards in quotes. 6. Card size and white color. 7. Dishes on table. Possibility of unconscious pre-knowledge through earlier observation of the above. 1. Negative, unaware of son's interest in baseball and not conscious of his basic activities. Number 2. Negative, had no knowledge of Mr. Banson's action in morning around car, and reported action was not part of his daily routine. 3. Negative, as indicated, such actions were not routine, i.e., loading of the car, thus could not be part of pre-observed habit patterns of Mr. Banson. 4. Indeterminate, possible that the device had been observed previously, but not in location indicated. Number 5. Negative, no part of pre-observation memory, as Mr. Banson did not make a habit of such action. Sorting mail at the table was an unusual event. 6. Negative, for reasons just given, coupled with no such habits in own life pattern of sorting mail at table, plus misinterpretation of action itself. 7. Indeterminate, pre-observation could have been applied here in relation to the Banson family, as Ryder had taken breakfast there several times. And now we have another date, 10/12/60, night. The results are so contradictory to what I believed that it must be reported in detail. In our attempts to find some answers anywhere, we had come in contact with Mrs. M., who purportedly had mediumistic powers. I have and still have the highest regard for her as a person of great kindness and integrity. However, in 2 sittings in which we participated, I came away with a definite impression that Mrs. M., although deeply sincere, was acting out some form of split personality when she went into trance. The guides who took over her body and spoke through her vocal cords were to me nothing more or less than manifestations of this. This implied not that I thought Mrs. M. deliberately created this illusion, but that it happened as a result of a self-induced hypnotic state, and she truly had no knowledge of what took place. I was sure that in no way was Mrs. M. attempting to fake. She wasn't and isn't that type of person. What left me unconvinced was that when I had asked her guides, her dead husband and an American Indian, certain questions as they spoke through her, I received evasive replies. The best I could get was, "You will discover this through your own sources." This, at the time, seemed to me to be a simple way to avoid the answer that could be verified in some other way. It is important that I point out my complete skepticism of Mrs. M. and her guides. Yet what happened last night and the report today utterly confuses me. R.G., a friend of Mrs. M., had suggested that I attempt to visit a séance to be held by Mrs. M. in a New York apartment Friday night. Then it says in brackets, last night. I half agreed, stating that I wasn't sure that it was possible. Frankly, when Friday night came, the meeting had slipped my mind, consciously at least. Here's what took place. After a normal evening at home, my wife and I went up to bed around 11:30. My wife fell asleep almost immediately, and as I could tell from her steady, deep breathing. As I lay there, evidently deeply relaxed and possibly half asleep, I suddenly felt the walking over your grave coldness, and the hairs on the back of my neck started to rise. I looked across the half-darkened room, fearfully, yet utterly fascinated. I don't know what I expected, but standing in the doorway leading from the hall was a white, ghost-like figure. It actually looked like the traditional figure of a ghost, some 6 feet tall, as it stood there, with a flowing, sheet-like material draping it from its head to the floor. One hand was reaching out and holding on to the door jamb. I was completely frightened, and I had no chance to connect the figure with anything that I had done. The moment it began to move toward me, I cringed in half terror, and at the same time, I felt I had to see what it was. Almost immediately, I felt hands placed over my eyes, so I couldn't see. I kept putting my hands away. I kept putting the hands away in spite of my fear until finally the ghost-like form was beside the bed. Let me read this part again. I think maybe I misread it or I'm not understanding it. I was completely frightened, and I had no chance to connect the figure with anything I had done. The moment it began to move toward me, I cringed in half terror, and at the same time, I felt I had to see what it was. Almost immediately, I felt hands placed over my eyes, so I couldn't see. I kept putting the hands away in spite of my fear until finally the ghost-like form was beside the bed, not a foot away from me. Then someone took hold of my upper arms gently, and I moved up out of the bed. With this, I calmed down, evidently because I felt that whatever it was friendly. I didn't struggle or resist. Immediately, there was a quick sense of movement, and we, in brackets, I then felt there were 2 of them, one on each side, close bracket, and we were suddenly over a small room, as if we were looking down on it from the ceiling. In the room below were 4 women. I looked at the 2 beings on each side of me. One was a blonde male, the other dark-haired, almost oriental. Both seemed to be quite young. In their early 20s. They were smiling at me. I spoke to them, and I said they would have to excuse my attitude, as I was uncertain of what I was doing. Then I floated down to the only empty chair, and I sat down in it. A large, tall woman in a dark suit sat opposite me. A woman in what looked like an ankle-length white robe sat next to me. The other 2 were indistinct. A woman's voice asked if I would remember that I had been there, and I assured her that I certainly would. Another woman said something about cancer, but that's all I could get. Then one of the women, the one in the dark suit, came over and swung over the side of my chair and draped herself right on top of me. I didn't feel her weight, but for some reason, she got up suddenly. There was laughter, but my mind was on other things. Evidently, the contact with the woman who sat on top of me had altered things. Just at that moment, I heard a male voice say, "I think he's been away long enough. We'd better take him back." I was torn between going and staying, but I didn't argue. Almost instantly, I was back lying in my bed, and that was it, except that my wife had been awake during the entire time. She stated that I alternately gasped, made moaning and whimpering noises, and then seemed to do little or no breathing at all. Other than that, she hadn't seen or heard anything, except that our cat, asleep in the room, had awakened and had been extremely nervous. My wife was quite upset and worried. I'm sure I would have been too if I had gone through the same with her. The meeting certainly deserved checking, so I phoned RG, and I discovered several things. First, there were 4 women at the stance. At my request, they were gathered together at the same apartment, very small living room, wearing the same clothes. The woman in the dark suit was of identical build as I saw, and she inadvertently sat in the chair reserved for me. This had taken place later in the evening, after 11:30, when the stance had been long over, and the 4 were sitting around talking. The tall woman had jumped up out of my chair when the rest called out, "Don't sit on Bob." And they laughed at the joke. One of the other women had worn a long white housecoat. The words about my remembering were not spoken orally. That supermind communication again? ? But one of the women had stated that she was working at the Cancer Memorial Hospital the following day. I had met the other 2 women previously, Mrs. M and RG, but the 2 herein described were then strangers to me. 4 women, the clothes of 2, the build of 1, the sitting in the chair, the sitting on top of me and jumping up, the laughter, the small room, the cancer reference. That's too much coincidence even for me, and beyond my ability to hallucinate that properly. I am convinced, but the 2 men, does Mrs. M truly communicate with her dead husband and an Indian? I didn't know until afterward that he had been a blonde. I must be less of a skeptic and more open-minded with Mrs. M. In the visit to the apartment, time coincides with a physical event, autosuggestion, hallucination, indeterminate, as idea of trip may have been retained unconsciously, although no conscious attempt was made. Identical reports with conditions of actual events. Number 1, size of room. Number 2, number of women present. 4. 3, empty chair. 4, apparel of the 2 women. 5, cancer mentioned. 6, action of the woman sitting in the chair. 7, laughter, attitude in the group. Possibility of unconscious pre-knowledge through earlier observation of the above. 1, negative, no previous visits or descriptions of the apartment. Number 2, indeterminate. RG may have revealed the number of people to be present. Number 3, negative. Idea of empty chair came to group only during the same evening. Number 4, negative, had never met women before nor observed their dress. 5, negative, for some reasons just given, would have no knowledge of unknown woman's work at the Cancer Memorial Hospital. Number 6, negative, as action was unplanned. 7, negative, as reaction of others was spontaneous. Now, another day, 8:15:63 afternoon. A productive experiment after a long layoff. R.W., a businesswoman whom I know quite well through long work association and a close friend aware of my activities, but somewhat skeptical still, in spite of rather unwilling participation, has been away this week on her vacation up the New Jersey coast. I do not know exactly where she is vacationing, other than that, nor did I inform her of any planned experiment, simply because I hadn't thought of it until today, Saturday. This afternoon, I lay down to renew experimentation, and I decided I would make a strong effort to visit RW, wherever she was. Brackets, it says, Rule 1 in my case always had been that I am most successful going to someone I know well, and the opportunity does not come up too often. Close bracket. I lay down in the bedroom about 3 in the afternoon, went into a relaxation pattern, felt the warmth, high order vibration, and then thought heavily of the desire to go to RW. There was the familiar sensation of movement through a light blue, blurred area, and then I was in what seemed to be a kitchen. RW was seated in a chair to the right. She had a glass in her hand. She was looking to my left, where 2 girls, about 17 or 18, one blonde, one brunette, were also sitting, each with glasses in their hands, drinking something. The 3 of them were in conversation, but I could not hear what they were saying. I first approached the 2 girls directly in front of them, but I could not attract their attention. Then I turned to RW, and I asked if she knew I was there. "Oh, yes, I know you're there. Here. I know you're here," she replied mentally, or with that superconscious communication, as she was still in oral conversation with the 2 girls. I asked if she was sure that she would remember that I had been there. "Oh, I will definitely remember," the reply came. I said that this time I was going to make sure she remembered. "I will remember. I'm sure I will," RW said, still in oral conversation simultaneously. I stated that I had to be sure she would remember, so I was going to pinch her. "Oh, you don't need to do that." "I'll remember," RW said hastily. I said I had to be sure, so I reached out and I tried to pinch her. Gently, I thought. I pinched her in the side, just above the hips, and below the rib cage. She let out a good, "Ow!" and I backed up because I was somewhat surprised. I really hadn't expected to be able to actually pinch her, satisfied that I had made some impression. At the least, I turned and I left, and I thought of the physical and was back almost immediately. I got up physically and went over to the typewriter where I am now. RW will not be back until Monday, and then I can determine if I made the contact or if there was another unidentifiable miss. Time of return, 3:35. Important aftermath, : It is Tuesday, after the Saturday of the experiment. RW returned to work yesterday, and I asked her what she had been doing Saturday afternoon between 3 and 4. Knowing my reason for asking, she said that she would have to think about it and let me know on today. Here is what she reported today. On Saturday between 3 and 4 was the only time there was not a crowd of people in the beach cottage where she was staying. For the first time, she was alone with her niece, dark-haired, about 18, and the niece's friend, about the same age, blonde. They were in the kitchen dining area of the cottage from about 3:15 to 4. She said she was having a drink and the girls were having cokes, and they were doing nothing but sitting around talking. I asked RW if she remembered anything else, and she said no. I questioned her more closely, but she could not remember more. Finally, in impatience, I asked her if she remembered the pinch. A look of complete astonishment crossed her face. Was that you? She stared at me for a moment and then went into the privacy of my office. She turned and lifted, just slightly, the edge of her sweater where it joined her skirt on the left side. There were 2 brown and blue marks at exactly the spot where I had pinched her. I was sitting there, talking to the girls, R.W. said, when all of a sudden I felt this terrible pinch. I must have jumped a foot. I thought my brother-in-law had come back and sneaked up behind me. I turned around, but there was no one there. Never had any idea it was you. It hurt. I apologized for pinching so hard, and she obtained from me a promise that if I tried any such thing again, I would try something other than a pinch that hard. In this episode, the time coincided with the actual events. Autosuggestion, hallucination, indeterminate, as willful desire was suggested, and pre-knowledge was present of general location of RW at that time. Identical reports with the conditions of actual events. Number 1, the location, inside rather than outside. Number 2, the number of people present. 3, description of the girls. 4, actions of the people present. 5, acknowledgement of pinching. 6, physical marks from pinching. Possibility of unconscious pre-knowledge through earlier observation of the above. 1, negative pre-knowledge implied activity outdoors on beach rather than indoors. Number 2, negative pre-knowledge implied adults in group as RW was visiting sister and brother-in-law. Number 3, negative indeterminate possible pre-knowledge of niece and hair color through RW sometime previously. Negative as to friend of niece, her hair color and age. Number 4, negative no pre-knowledge of non-existent habit pattern for that particular moment of the day. 5, negative RW had no pre-knowledge of experimental attempt, as no such attempt had been made previously, nor was experimenter in the habit of pinching RW, had not done so previously. Number 6, negative, no possible way that RW could have known where pinch marks should have occurred to conform with the area reported. There are additional evidential reports of some which have been included in other portions of this writing where they may help illustrate certain areas of theory and practice. 1 or 2 have been attempted under laboratory conditions. The incidents may have been simple and unimportant in themselves, but as minute pieces in a mosaic, they were vital. The emerging pattern through the glimpses of the whole was made believable and acceptable to me only through the inclusion of hundreds of such scraps of evidence. Perhaps it may be to you too.